Catherine Wilson. Oh, so you started this, okay.
Yeah, I started this 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
Time flies. Probably feels like it was yesterday.
Or a million years ago.
Or a million, yeah. I know, it's one or the other. It's one or the other.
In the day.
Yeah. Catherine Wilson is here, and this is a great example of some people who are a victim of any situation and find a way out. And that is good enough. You find a way out. You took it a step farther and are now helping other victims of sex trafficking. And when we think of sex trafficking, we think of like people being brought into the country, but it's so much more than that.
So what we do is we explain to people what sex trafficking is.
Right.
Because the word sex trafficking, it's like, is this, Russians that are coming by flatbed trucks or,
right.
What is this? So explaining to them that sex trafficking, if you think of what prostitution is in most people's imaginations, prostitution, if you are a minor, is automatically sex trafficking. So if you're quote unquote a prostitute and you are under the age of 18, you fall under the legal definition of sex trafficking.
Oh.
An adult can be sex trafficked if they meet the criteria, and the criteria is, are they being forced in any way, shape, or form to sell themselves, to trade themselves for some sort of gain? Because there's a third person, then that's sex trafficking.
Would you say, there are some people who will say prostitution for some people is a choice when you're an adult.
But some people would say that, and I understand there's a lot of folks who are for the legalization of sex workers.
Right.
What we're doing is really focusing on the vast majority. The people who make that trade as a grown-up talking to another grown-up, that's their business. But in the world of sex trafficking, it is the largest illegal business in the world. There are billions of dollars being made on this, and it is on the back of our children. The average entry age into sex trafficking is 12 years old. So we are against the legalization of prostitution because the vast majority of it is this sort of modern day slavery. So what Stop Trafficking Us does is we explain, what sex trafficking is, who's vulnerable. We explain all the moving parts and pieces, who's the pimp, who's the John, all that. But our heart of hearts is really on getting folks to stop having sex with children. Just, the genesis of so much, if we look at our society and say, okay, we've got kids dropping out of school, we've got a high suicide rate, we have kids who are incarcerated, we've got sex trafficking, we've got all these different kinds of addictions, and we follow that down, right? We follow all of that down to its genesis. 89% of the time, those I'll just call individuals have been sexually abused as children.
So that is often the root of not only sex trafficking, but so many other...
So much. So there's this thing called ACEs, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. So back in the 80s, Kaiser Permanente and the Center for Disease Control did this research about how come actually they had a weight loss program, and all these people a year later had, gained the weight back, and they were trying to figure it out. And so they started asking them questions like, in your home, was there food insecurity? Had somebody been in prison? Was there mental illness? Was there sexual abuse? And what they found out was the percentage of people who gained the weight back had a high, what they called an ACE score. And they said, if this is true for people who can, in Northern California, who can afford insurance, then what's it like in the real world where people can't afford? Then they did the correlation between being sexually abused and all these other things. And what they found was that the actual biology, Eva likes cake. If you take the cake out of the oven before it's cooked, it's not going to be a fully formed cake. The human body needs to be baked. And if it's interrupted through trauma, through food insecurity, through all these other things, then the biology is affected when they get older. So in the world of hospitals, we have frequent flyers. We have people who are constantly going to the emergency rooms because they can't get their blood pressure under control. They can't get their blood sugar under control. They can't get their pain, ding, 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 under control. Okay. And what they found was the vast majority of those frequent flyers had high ACE scores.
Wow.
So it's
the root of so many.
It's so many.
Right,
And so Oprah did a great thing a year ago. So if you Googled Oprah and 60 Minutes, she did this great thing on trauma. And her bestie was saying, I've never seen you like so riled up about anything in all your years on the Oprah show. What's the deal? And she said, as soon as I learned about ACEs, I called my people, and every philanthropic thing that we do from this day forward is forever changed. Because now I have to say, not how could this individual do these horrible things, but what happened to this individual as a child that created them to be who they are today. It is a perception change. And so when I was volunteering at Long Creek Youth Center right before I turned 50, I just wanted to give back. I was, just wanted to give back. I was getting old and feeling like I needed to do something in our community. And so I was at Long Creek, and I hadn't come out about my life. I'd spent decades in therapy. I was over it and didn't want to go back and look at it anymore. But when I met these girls on the girls unit, I was just like, oh my gosh, almost every single one of them had this sexual abuse history. And maybe they were doing survival sex, maybe they were actually sex trafficked, maybe they were sex trafficked and didn't even realize it. They felt like they were just helping their father pay the rent by having sex with his friends. Or it was just crazy. And I'm like, okay, so what do we have going on in our community about teaching our community about the reality of this?
So the majority of the goal of stoptraffickingus.org, if you want to go find out more in different ways you can get involved, is the primary goal education and awareness?
Absolutely. Our primary thing, we've got some great organizations. Dee Clark with Survivor Speak USA does a lot of one-on-one. She works directly with women who've been on the street or maybe still a little bit on, a little bit off, making that transition, as well as women who've been off for a year. We've got Mikasa's got stuff. Preble Street has stuff for sex trafficking. My gift is being able to be an example of that whole, I'm thinking of Forrest Gump. Look at Jenny, right? Oh my gosh, Jenny is a perfect example. That sort of domino effect. I'm one person with one story, but I have hundreds of thousands of victim spirits all around me who've all endured similar things, and we stand as one. And I'm just like this conduit of education saying, okay, this is my story, but I represent too many stories. What is unique about mine is that I have a happy ending, and most people don't.
Right. And it's a hard subject to talk about. You use the word sex. And
it really is. I mean, it really is. What's amazing to me is I'm old enough to have been around when HIV was a big thing and nobody wanted to talk about that. Nobody wanted to talk about anxiety, depression. Nobody wanted to talk about Vietnam. Nobody wanted to talk about transgender. Nobody wanted to talk about color differences. Now look how diverse we are. So I was watching this Netflix called Wigs. You guys saw Wigs about transgender and drag queens?
Oh, yeah, I've heard about it. I'm supposed to watch it. It's on my list.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And they were saying that the transgender was like the lowest of low.
Right.
If you were a black drag queen, oh my gosh, that was even worse. And how the whole thing. And I was thinking, boy, that is the way it is about talking about child sexual molestation.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like that is the taboo. It horrifies.
So what has that been like? I mean, it's been 5 years now since you started Stop Trafficking Us, stoptraffickingus.org, and then, but also sort of coming out as a survivor. What has that been like in your everyday life? Is it weird? Does it feel like there's a burden off your shoulders? Or
no? That's a great question. So for me, people say, well, has this helped your healing? And I'm like, oh, honey, you couldn't do this if you weren't healed. I mean, you really had to do your work before you could do this.
Was that therapy?
Yeah, right. So my therapy was, decades of therapy. I couldn't tolerate drugs or alcohol on the street, just God's grace. And I could not tolerate antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety. I mean, I can't do Novocaine, So blessing in disguise, right? And so for me, I remember every horrible thing that happened, and the post-traumatic stress afterwards was horrific, and took, many, many years and a lot of different kinds of therapy, from landmark education, the Hoffman quadrinity process, Gestalt, EMDR, energy work, kumbaya around the bonfire, whatever.
Whatever it takes.
I'm invited to some of those.
Right, you have been invited to. It's about time you come and dance around the bonfire. So for me, I did a ton of work before I did this. And then when I did this, what was interesting was prior to coming out, I imagined, the narrator in my mind would say, yeah, Eva's acting like she likes you, but if she really knew all the stuff that, your past is full of, she would not want to be your friend. And then when I came out, it was, how come Eva's looking at me like that? Like, does she know? Because people's reaction, I'll be at a dinner party with women, and I know some of them know. And then there's this one woman that I just met, and she is staring holes through me, right? And I'm like, hello, is there something on my dress? Can you see my cleavage? What, am I shorter than you realize? I tell everybody I'm short. Is this new to you? And then afterwards, I find out that she found out, but she didn't know how to react to me. She didn't know what to say. And then I have one friend who I love, and I don't correct her on this, but she calls me her sex trafficked friend.
Oh, geez.
Back in the day, like, this is my gay friend,
Right.
This is my black friend,
Right.
This is my sex trafficked friend,
Right.
And I laugh, I laugh. Okay, fine.
Maybe
I'll
takes
do
a
that.
little bit of
it's
awkwardness
okay.
out of the room.
Go ahead.
Have you had the opportunity to see what the work you're doing with your organization is doing for individuals? Like, has there been someone who said to you, thank you? Like, just kind of a quiet individual thank you.
So many people, so many. Some of the coolest things, I think, I was at Hannaford, and again, somebody's staring at me, and I'm wondering why she's staring at me. And eventually she comes over to me, and she said, are you Catherine, the one that does the sunrise pictures on Facebook Live? Yes, I am that crazy person. And she said, you're the sex trafficked, whispering yes. And she said, well, my 13-year-old daughter had some friends, 13-year-old girlfriends, who disclosed something to her, and they brought it to her, the mom, and said, will you help us with this? And she said, oh, that's none of my business. They need to go to their parents. To which her daughter said, that's not what Catherine would tell you to do.
Oh,
because they've been following you on Facebook.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah.
And so she did do, the right thing. It's the private messages. It's the people that don't necessarily comment or do likes or anything that surprise me with a message or something. One woman came up to me at Potluck for a purpose, an anti-sex trafficking monthly thing. And this woman came over to me and said, my husband and she pointed to her husband, who is shyly in the background, like, oh my gosh, saying, hey, we want to thank you. Because of you, I went back to therapy. I'm no longer taking my personal issues out on my husband and my children. And our family is reunited, and we're on the road to health and recovery because you kept saying, do enough work, do your work. And what does that look like? It's enough work.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Congratulations on being named a 20 Outstanding Woman. And we admire your courage. And I know it took a lot of work, but look how it's paying off.
Well, the goal is to be Mr. Rogers, right? He's my hero, is to be the helper. When he says, okay, there's all these awful things that are happening in the world, look for the helpers, right? And so my goal is to be that helper, to educate people, because it is such an awful topic. It's to say, okay, let's bring this out of the darkness. Let's turn up the light of love. What is a little different about me is I'm like, we have to have love for even for the offenders. Like, when people are saying that the offenders need to be mutilated and hung from the trees, I'm like, if you do a witch hunt thing, what child is going to want to disclose about, because we know that the people who are abusing the kids are somebody in their circle of trust.
Yeah.
And if you're bad mouthing and you want it violent, they're not going to want to tell about dad or uncle or brother or coach, right? They're going to say, well, I just want them to stop doing this to me. I don't want anything bad to happen to them.
Right.
So we really have to step out of that closed box of violence and really have compassion with zero tolerance.
It's
and
like there's a Martin Luther King quote that I think of, that darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that.
Absolutely. And so as our communities, we have to say, okay, what policies and procedures can we have in place that will keep the offender honest, right? How can we, because they're everywhere, right? They're everywhere. Wherever that people say, well, how do you know an offender? Well, you walk into any group of people and say, who's the heterosexual? Pick who the heterosexual is, because that's how you're going to know who is inclined to have sex with children.
Right.
They're everywhere.
Right.
And so what we have to do is we have to set up a safe space, right?
Yeah.
How can we have to, the Boy Scouts has a new, and you don't have to be a Boy Scout or a Boy Scout leader. It was such a great education to go on the boyscout.com, I think, website, and they have a training. Their new policies and procedures is pretty darn cool.
Yeah.
The Methodist Church also has one. All of the Sunday school classes have to have a window.
Yeah.
That's always 2 teachers, no matter what. No child is alone. I love the idea of any sort of leader who's going to correspond with a text with the child, that it's a group text. That child's parent is on.
There's so many things.
Cool things.
Well, I want to make sure. So if you want to find out more, not only about your story, but how you could get involved, and I'm sure there are people, just because of the reach of our radio station, who hear this, who are also victims, who have maybe not disclosed that yet. And there's some tools for you, not only to give you hope, but to give you instruction on what to do next, and to find someone like Catherine, or maybe to find Catherine at stoptraffickingus.org. And thank you for what you do and your courage, and for being one of Coast and Hannaford's 20 outstanding women.
I'm curtsying. You can't see that, but
Good stuff. We're going to do a quick photo over there. You want to put your cape on?
I do want to put my cape on.
Good, saved you. You were so sweet to bring those.
Do you go by Catherine Ann Wilson or just Catherine Wilson?
It doesn't matter. Catherine Ann. Catherine Ann's great. Yeah, I'm going to put that right there so people can see us having fun. Yes, I must have the superhero cape of love on. And my Woodstock. And I've got my
parachute pants?
The shoes that I have on right now.
I love them.
Yeah, Jimi Hendrix. Purple velvet.
Oh my God.
Purple velvet. No, this is my.
Awesome. Yeah, come right in the middle here.
Come right in the middle.
Nobody here recognized you.
Yeah, I get to see Steve when we're done.
Steve.
Oh, Schneider.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I love him. He is he's probably the nicest guy in the building.
Did you see Chuck too? Because he was asking about you.
I didn't get to see Chuck.
He's probably across the hall.
Cool.
Did they take your picture already?
Yes. Reggie?
Was that fun?
He was nice.
He's a sweetheart, yeah.
Nice guy.
Okay, here we go. Eva's going to tilt her head 4 different ways while we take the photo. Here, get closer to it so it doesn't look like you.
I'm over here.
Okay, there we go.
I look tall. I love it.
I know, exactly. Right. Blake's like, can I borrow those shoes?
Yeah, right.
These are great shoes.
All right.
Fun.
Thank you again for the cake pops. And
Absolutely.